Welcome back to another episode of Dyson Sphere program, and as you can probably tell, our planet has gone through quite a transformation. So we now more or less have all of the different components being manufactured on our planet and sent into those interstellar logistics stations so they can be transported to other planets if need be. But as you can also probably see, we are at a distinct lack of power, so all of these factories aren't actually working at the moment. The factories producing our components are based upon the principles that we spoke about last time. Items are delivered to our interstellar logistics station via drones. Those items then come out via conveyor belt and are split from 1 into 12, which is why we have 12 factories manufacturing components for us. And once we have the manufactured item, it simply goes back into the same logistics station, ready to be transported around. And the 12 manufacturing machines that we have in every factory are actually based upon how fast the conveyor belts were beforehand. We had Mark II conveyor belts, which was 720 items every minute, which most factories required about 60 items being produced every minute, so it was just a simple case of taking that 720 and divided by 60, which gave us a 12. So all of the factories that we have making components for us are based upon this design, but this is obviously then drawing a lot of power that we are not really supplying properly at the moment. We still have some more work to do whenever it comes to producing items. At the moment we are definitely using a lot more than we're making, but this is just a simple case of making more factories that will eventually make those items for us. But good news on our science front, we have more than sufficient amount of these blue electromagnetic matrices, and similar to our red energy matrices, and we are slowly making these yellow structure matrices. It's just taking a lot of time because we're really needing these titanium crystals in, which are being produced over in this factory here, because we've definitely got enough titanium ingots in as well as these organic crystals in to make them. But again, it's just a power management issue because we don't have enough power going into them to continue the manufacturing of them. And I've been playing around with these solar panels a little bit, and I've put in quite a few of them. They're not producing a lot of power, but whenever they are all acting together, we're getting some power up, which is definitely helping. And whenever I look at the wireless power tower here for our power stats, I can actually see we're producing about 90 megawatts of power from our solar panels. But we are needing about 270 megawatts for our consumption demand. And I know for a fact that 270 megawatts is really just a drop in the ocean for our power demand, because I know once all these factories are up and operational that we actually require in the gigajoules worth of power to be produced. We have this low demand just now because our factories are either turned off or are no longer producing items because they're full. But that's the lowdown for our factory, and also setting out our plans for today. We need to get more power into these factories, so that's exactly what we're going to do today. And I think we'll accomplish that by unlocking some more technologies, like this mini fusion power generation, which is going to unlock these mini fusion power stations, but it's going to require these deuterium fuel rods in order to power them, which we did unlock the technology for last time for this fractionator, but we haven't actually played around with it yet. The energy storage technology is going to unlock our accumulators for us, and this will eventually allow us to store surplus energy. Unfortunately, we do need to start producing more power first, but these are going to come in quite handy as well. Admittedly, the free technologies that we have for our main quest, being the photon frequency conversion, solar sail orbit system and the ray receiver, I'm not quite sure what they do, but as the main quest is all about generating power with this Dyson Sphere, I am hoping they will open some more options for us to produce some more power, so I may as well unlock those technologies as well. This satellite power distribution system looks an interesting technology as well, because I think this might be another upgrade for our actual power distribution on the planet in terms of our Tesla coils and power lines. This interstellar power transmission technology, this is going to unlock the energy exchanger. This seems to be more of a beefed up version of our accumulators, but it's going to allow us to transport power from planet to planet. So again, this is another technology that's going to be incredibly helpful. Well, that's a lot of different technologies that we're just awaiting research for. So I think it's time for me to make a more permanent home for our science matrix labs and actually make a factory up for it. And I am going to make the factory in this space we have here, but I'll need to get rid of these stone veins first of all. Fortunately, we have this option to allow us to bury these veins, which means that I'll actually be able to build on top of them. So let's just do that. And I also need to get rid of all of these storage units here because they've just been in the way. And the first step to building a factory is to place one of these interstellar logistics stations, which means I first need to make one, but I'm going to require one of these planetary logistics stations first. And the only components that I require left to make it are these steel beams, as well as some titanium ingots. But now that I'm in planetary view, I can simply find the factories that are producing those items, such as this one here producing our steel, and inside the station we already have a nice build-up of these steel beams, so I'll just take out a handful of those and put it straight into my inventory. And just the exact same process for our titanium ingots, I'll just take a handful of them out, place them in my inventory, and that's another brilliant reason why we should have these logistics station and drones, because I can now grab any component from any factory on my planet so long as it's inside one of those logistics stations. Well, with our logistics station, we'll just find a home for it, which I'll place about here, and then we'll sort some storage for it, and then have that storage feed directly into our station. Now for the long part, placing in 12 of these science labs, and unfortunately this coal mine, which is pretty much done, is going to need to be removed. But that is now all 12 of the science labs placed, and I've now just realised that I don't actually need this storage here. I'm so used to making factories that make components. All of the items that come into these labs here are just simply used up, so I don't need to store anything. So that's now looking a bit better. Maybe I didn't need to remove that coal miner. Oh well, moving on, time for the belt splitting, which for this one is going to get quite complicated, because all of these matrix labs are going to require all 3 of these different matrices going into them. So not only am I going to need to split things off into 12, but I'm going to need to do that 3 times. And that's pretty much the splitters now in place, so just to belt them up. Which always starts by having one conveyor belt come out from the planet station and go into the very first splitter. This first splitter is then going to split things into 3 different ways, and then this splitter here is going to split into 2, and finally the splitters near the labs are also going to split into 2. So there we are. This is a 1 to 12 belt balancing setup. So now to replicate this another twice, which is rather simple for this side, although I am now lacking these conveyor belts Mark III, but fortunately for me, I already have a factory producing the conveyor belts for me. Right, time for the messy part. Now to put another one of these belt splitters just below this one here, which is the same process as before. The difference is that we now have to use splitters to go over these conveyor belts in front of us. Well, I think that's all of the spaghetti now made, so let's just get things powered on. And this is always the simple part for this. Just a shame that once again we don't have enough power actually coming into these for anything really to happen. So the final step is just setting up our logistics station, which first of all I'm going to place some robots into, and because we have some factories making lots of robots, I'm never going to run out of them now. Then we'll assign the items to be delivered to the station, and then finally demand all of those items. So the drone should now make the very short distance to get all of those matrices and come back into our station, and if I set the filter up right for our conveyor belts to allow these items to come out, we now get this rather neon looking factory up and working. Even the matrix labs are working on about 40% power just now. Hopefully soon these new researches will really help us here, and whenever our power is up and working, I will add some more labs on top of this to really speed things up, but for now we're struggling just as is. Well, as our science is being done, I should really look into these fractionators, and at some point as well I need to visit that lava planet to get myself some silicon ore so I can really start making more of these high purity silicon bars, because it's the lack of them that is causing a lack of these microcrystalline components, which is in turn then causing a lack of these processors to be made. So what I gather from the tutorial I was given, we just need to feed this thing some hydrogen, and again it just so happens that I have a factory producing hydrogen for me. So I'm just going to use this planetary logistics station to get in some of this hydrogen just now, and we'll take the output of deuterium and put it straight back into the station. And yes, I know, the more buildings I'm placing down here, the more strain it puts on our power supply, but we are slowly working towards it, because at least intermittently when we do get power, we can get some items being made, so this fractionator is now working. So we're now getting a small supply of this deuterium out, as well as hydrogen as well. And that's our energy storage research now complete, so we have our accumulators. So to make these accumulators, we're going to require 6 iron ingots, as well as 6 of these supermagnetic rings, and 4 of these crystal silicon items, which of course it had to be silicon, the one item that we're really lacking just now. Although our photon research was a lot faster there, so that's us now unlocked this photon combiner. Well, I'll look into that in a second. For now, I'm going to set this logistics station for it to collect some silicon ore from us, but remotely. So it means that we are off to our lava planet to get this silicon ore. And there is our silicon ore vein right here actually. So similar to last time, we'll just set up a very basic factory mining them. We'll get them stored, and then we'll eventually put them into an interstellar logistics station. And we will get this station to remotely supply our silicon ore. And again, I didn't really think too much about the power requirements for this, but I did make some of these wind turbines, so I'm hoping this will be enough energy to power them. Yes, this clearly is not a very windy planet. We're only producing 200 kilowatts per wind turbine here at 70% strength. Well, I'll quickly grab up some silicon ore and just make my own solar panels for this. Well, again, not great, not a lot of power going into this system, but it is working just now, so we should start getting some of this silicon ore into the station and being stored for us until our logistic vessels come to collect it. Well, I'm just going to trust that this is going to work, so I'm going to head back to our planet. There is a logistics vessel heading right for me at some speed actually, so at least we've gotten one coming over there to grab some of that silicon ore for us. Well, just as we get back, we have unlocked our mini fusion power station, so this may be the salvation to our power problem. So to make the mini fusion power stations, we're going to require 12 titanium alloys, 10 supermagnetic rings, we are going to require 8 of these carbon nanotubes, which we don't yet have the research for, as well as 4 processors. Our carbon nanotube components comes from the high strength material research, and it's very simple to get, requiring 600 red signs and 150 yellow signs. And just looking briefly into how to make those carbon nanotubes, we're going to need 3 of those graphene materials and 1 titanium ingot, which is nice and easy. We have factories making those. To make the deuterium fuel rods, we're going to require 1 titanium alloy, as well as 10 of these deuterium elements, and 1 supermagnetic ring. Well, I have both of these planetary logistics stations sat here doing nothing for me at the moment, so I may as well set them up to bring items over for me so that I can actually make some of these fuel rods. Well, that's this factory now set up, and whenever it does get some power in, we'll start getting some of these deuterium fuel rods out from it. In the meantime, I'm hoping that our logistic vessels have brought us some more silicon so I can start making some of these crystal silicons, which they have actually. We now have 600 in stock, so I'll take all of those out and just place them into this storage here. And these will eventually be turned into these high purity silicon bars, and then eventually into our crystal silicon components, which we require to make these accumulators. In fact, we've already made a little stockpile of over 50 of them, so let's make some accumulators. Well, I'm assuming these should be placed near a power source, although looking at this thermal power station over here, it's not really giving as much power out of them. I'm guessing they might be better placed here with our solar panels that are actually giving us some power. Well, that's all of them hooked up, and we have accumulated 0 joules worth of power. Again, probably because all of our solar panels are overloaded here, so there is no spare energy for this. Well, I'm happy to leave them here just now until we get some more power, but I think these deuterium fuel rods might be the way forward. Speaking of which, aren't being made very quickly, but we do have 2 of them now. And that is our satellite distribution technology done as well. So we have unlocked our satellites, which I think will be more handy for our factories down the line whenever power isn't too much of an issue. But I've seen they're going to require 2 of these frame materials, which is again another research that we don't have. And it too requires these carbon nanotubes in order to create. And that's the high strength material research done as well. So we now have our carbon nanotubes, which I make here inside our chemical plant. And once again, whenever we get power into this, we will start manufacturing some of these carbon nanotubes. We also unlock these photon combiner components, and they require 2 prisms as well as 1 circuit board to make. And somewhere on this planet, I am manufacturing circuit boards, so once I find them, we can start making some of them. In fact, here they are. And that noise there also symbolises that we are starting to make some of these carbon nanotubes. But I'm not really sure what these photon combiners are for. I am going to make a couple of them, and we'll hopefully maybe get a pop-up letting us know what to do with them. In the meantime, we've made 14 carbon nanotubes, which means I can also make one of these mini fusion power stations. Well, sadly there's been no tutorial regarding these photon combiners, so I have made a couple of them, and I don't see any buildings in here which I can do anything with them in. Although whenever I look back into our technologies, this solar sail orbit system technology has these solar sails, and I can see the photons are used to make that. So I'll activate that research as well, and we'll get it going. And I'll also unlock this interstellar power transmission technology, so we can start sending power between planets. Right, let's look at this mini fusion power station then. I have 10 of these deuterium fuel rods, so I'll put them inside as fuel. And one of these mini fusion generators are going to give us 9 megawatts of power, just from using one of these deuterium fuel rods. And just as I was about to make a comparison with our thermal power stations that only give us 2 megawatts of power each, we had our solar sail research complete. So it looks as if I'll be upgrading these thermal power stations to these new mini fusion power stations. But before I upgrade our power, I am interested in these solar sails, which again for now, I'll just make a handful of myself before I get some factories up making them. And reading the description for these solar sails, It says use the EM rail ejector to launch a large number of solar sails to form the Dyson Swarm, and our electromagnetic rail ejector is right here. It's going to require 20 steel, 20 gears, 5 processors and 5 supermagnetic rings to make. Very simple. So let's set one up and see what happens. Well, we now have access to this, our Dyson Sphere, and honestly I'm not really sure what the hell I'm looking at here. But what I do know is that I can now put these solar sails inside this EM rail injector, and once we get some power into this, we can maybe start creating our Dyson Sphere. Well, in fact, we'll give it its own power source. I'll give it one of these mini fusion power stations, and we'll put some of these deuterium rods inside it. This thing is now active, but I can see a gear cog inside it for us to choose an orbit. So I'm just going to press the one that was here by default. And that is now firing something right off into space. And there's our interstellar power transmission done as well. But I'm more interested in this at the moment. I can start to see something just appeared in the sky there. Kind of almost looks like a constellation. So let's head over to it and see what we're making. So we are now pretty up and close to them, and I can see the little sails there, and they're all facing towards our star in the middle there. So I'm going to assume we're just going to need hundreds and hundreds of all of these for it to eventually encompass around this star. And they look pretty interesting, really up close, but I'm not sure if I can do anything with them at this point, or if they're now just permanently here in space. Well, if I go back to this Dyson Sphere map, I can actually see them start to orbit around the star. So yeah, maybe just having a lot more of them up here in space is the only real thing that I can do just now until we unlock some more research. But they are pretty neat nonetheless. Let's go back to our planet. So we also unlocked these energy exchangers here, and these seem to be accumulators that we're going to be able to put on different planets to transfer power over to each other. They're pretty simple to make: titanium alloys, steel ingots, we've got some processors, and some particle containers. And hopefully now that we're starting to get some silicon ore from our lava planet, we will start producing more of these high purity silicon bars so we can make some more processors, which we have a few here actually. So we'll make some of these exchangers and play around with them. And just like everything else, they're actually quite a big construct. But we'll place one down here and see if anything happens.
You have built a powerful energy exchanger.
Well, this looks as if it's going to be a very handy building, but again, we're kind of needing power at the moment in order for it to function. So I think for now, it's just going to need to stand idle. So reading the description for this ray receiver technology, you can receive high energy rays transmitted from the Dyson Sphere directly to our power grid. So I think the ray receiver is something I should research next. Well, I just missed it, but that is the ray receiver technology complete as well. So we can now make some of these ray receivers. And we'll put the ray receiver just about here as well. So I'm not really sure what I'm looking at in this ray receiver interface. I have a feeling that it can only give us 5 megawatts of power for now, and this is something to do with some efficiency that we can upgrade with further technologies. But I'm going to need to look a bit more into this requested power and Dyson Sphere status because I'm not quite sure what the power numbers are for it. I've seen it's also overloaded at the moment, so I'll get rid of that powerless wire transmitter and we'll see what changes. Well, nothing really changed, and although we have a maximum output of 5 megawatts, I think at the moment we are only producing 220 kilowatts. Maybe adding some more of these solar sails into this EM rail ejector to go towards the Dyson Swarm might help. Well, it does seem to have made an effect because we have now doubled the amount of power out of this. We now have 440 kilowatts being produced. Well, I would have continued sending out those solar sails to get some more power in, but I seem to have got this pitch limit, and I'm not really sure what that means. Well, that's fine. I've now got quite a bit of homework to do just to look into these Dyson Sphere mechanics and more or less just understand what I've been trying to do today. But we have actually unlocked quite a lot of new technologies today, which has given us a lot of new components to play around with, which of course means more factories are going to need to be built to make those components. Until I get my head around the Dyson Sphere mechanics, I'm going to go and upgrade all of my thermal power stations to these mini fusion power stations, just to really buff up the power towards our planet so we can actually get some of these factories up and running. But thank you very much for watching. If you have any help or advice on these Dyson Spheres, I would love to hear them in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one.